Hey guys, there's been a bit in the news in the past month about the property market, as there always is. Just wanted to summarize it because it can get really confusing. Even for me, I'm going to talk about Help to Buy and this big kind of behemoth of housing policy Labor are trying to get through at the moment. Another one of those things is Build to Rent. Most of you probably haven't heard yet. And good old negative gearing. It's a good old political football and it pops up every now and then. I wanted to talk about negative gearing straight off because people love to argue about it. Basically, what's happened is news got out that when Labor first came in, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, commissioned a report to see what the impact of scrapping negative gearing would be on the economy. Later on, he's decided not to do that, but that's come to light just now. And people are asking the question, well, if Bill Shorten took it to an election. He took scrapping negative gearing to an election and lost that election. Can't remember when it was now, a little while back. If that was Labor's policy and Labor are looking into it again, what is their actual policy? Obviously, their policy is not to scrap it yet because they haven't come out and said that. For the average person, I just want to explain what negative gearing is, potentially why it's so contentious. Maybe talk about a little bit about the pros, because a lot of people talk about the negatives, especially like I've got my own particular views on the negatives. So negative gearing is basically when you buy an investment and it's losing money, you basically claim that back against your tax. So that sounded like a bit of a word salad then. Let's give you a more simple example. And let's start off with round numbers. I own 100 grand. I buy a property in this area. Let's say bottom line property, $600,000. You're getting about $470 a week rent for that property. Most property investors are funding their purchases with 100% equity. So they already have a property rather than have the deposit money and the upfront costs. They're borrowing against the equity of another property. So basically they're borrowing 100% against the property. So if you're borrowing 100% here, your property price is $600,000. The cost, stamp duty is about $30,000, might be a little bit more, but let's just use $630 as a round number. Let's now calculate the interest on that. I'm just calculating, yeah. About 6.5 you're going to pay on that money. That's just the interest. It's not including any principal if you're paying that off. But what that comes to is about 41 grand a year. So it's going to cost you $41,000 a year just to pay the interest on all of the debt, and $470 a week times 52, it's about 24 grand a year. Round it down to 24 grand a year. What did I just say? 40 grand. It's costing you about 40 grand or 41 just in interest, and your income is 24 grand. So 16 or 17 grand you're losing straight away. That's not including all of the other costs involved with buying a house. So you could probably add another, I'm going to guesstimate 10 grand on there. So let's say in this example, you're losing 26 grand per year. If you're earning $100,000, you were taxed on 100,000 because every pay that came out, the government took their tax. Basically what this means is at the end of the year, you're claiming your 100 grand income that you made in your job, but you're claiming the negative income, the amount you lost, 27 grand. So basically what happens is the government take that from the 100,000 and basically say, hey, we should only be taxing you based on $73,000 worth of income. Therefore, you get a refund because you've already paid tax on $100,000 worth of income through your employer. Basically, that's a very simple example of how negative gearing works. The benefit to society is that it's creating more properties. Don't get me wrong, it is creating rental supply for renters out there. It encourages investment. Obviously, a lot of people disagree, and I'm in that disagreement camp, but that's basically what it does. The thing to understand out of this is the more wealthy you are, the more this strategy benefits you, because the more income you're making, the higher your income tax is. So if you can obviously save on tax and you're getting taxed at a higher rate, you're going to save at a higher rate. I think this is the thorn in kind of your average Australian side, is that, well, the people that take the most amount of benefit over this are people that are actually wealthy. They're earning higher incomes. And if you look at the statistics of who are the people that are most taking advantage of this, they're all highly skilled, highly incomed workers. And we see that politicians, surprise, surprise, own a lot of properties, which is why negative gearing won't be scrapped. The broader thing here I want to talk about is actually just a political football. and it's been that for a long time. We should not expect changes to come about. I think it will come about eventually, and the people overwhelmingly want it because the trend of how things are going in the housing market is not going to change, and it's going to deliver worse results over time, in my opinion. I just find it super interesting that they can bring it in to improve things for everyone, but they can't just change their mind and bring it out. Whether you do that or not, that's a whole different discussion, because a lot of people say scrap it, and I'm in the scrap it crew, but that's not easy sailing either, because we've gotten so far down this path. Negative gearing, for example, in property has been around for a long time, since I think the 80s. Scrapping it's going to cause its own problems, because I just said before, it's creating supply for the rental market. So actually scrapping is going to drive up rents, because there's going to be more demand for houses, especially if we keep immigrating even at a slower rate. This kind of comes on to the other stuff Labor wants to bring in. Help to Buy, for example. Help to Buy is getting held up in the Senate, I believe, basically because the Greens don't want negative gearing in place, and they want to create some stronger restrictions in the housing market. Some I agree with, some I don't. Anyhow, that is why Help to Buy is getting held up. What is Help to Buy? Help to Buy is basically a government co-ownership scheme designed to make housing more affordable for people. And the reason I explain it that way is because when you explain it the other way, it kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense. The government co-buy is we, the government, will give you up to 40% of the purchase price of a property, but we're going to own 40% of that property. But what that's going to do is going to reduce your mortgage, because we're pitching in the 40% and you're not borrowing that money. So your mortgage is going to be a lot lower. It's just we're going to own a part of your property. There is a lot of kickback about it. Albo's saying, you know, the Greens and the Libs are all anti-housing and trying to speak that this is going to fix it. Unfortunately, I think either way, if it comes in or doesn't, it's not going to fix anything. You might get some short-term relief. You might get a bit of wealth effect because the value of people's houses go up. Therefore, they're not feeling the pinch as much. Even if interest rates remain high, they can stomach that because they feel as if their own personal wealth is increasing. And we've seen that plenty of times over the last 15 years. The thing I'd say about all of these policies, especially first home buyer ones like Help to Buy, is it's not technically a first home buyer one, but first home buyers would be advantaged a lot out of it. And we've seen that also in here in Victoria, where there's the government's home buyer scheme, which is they'll pitch in 25%. Unfortunately, I think this is the way it's going. Even if the Libs get in, they want this super for housing scheme, which is just, you know, it's all jumbled up, but it means the same thing at the end of the day. And for the guys on the bottom, basically what it means is it's just going to get harder and harder to get ahead. Either your family has property and they can leverage that equity, as in they can guarantor you into buying your first home. But if your family doesn't own any property, let's say you're an immigrant or something that doesn't have that much money, then you have to do it the old school way, which is save it and pay rent at the same time. Now that equation doesn't work anymore. 20 years ago it did, but increasingly now it's not working for people. For an example, single people couldn't do that on their own, whereas 20 years ago they could, now they can't. And it's getting increasingly harder for couples to do it, especially if they've got kids. So unfortunately that's the way it's going. Another one of these policies Labor want to bring in is build to rent, which no one has actually been talking about that much. I'm just going to explain what it is very briefly. Build to rent, rather than getting developers to build to sell and make a profit, they get investors to build something and their sole purpose is to rent those properties out. I don't know how I feel about this, because yes, it does increase the supply of rental properties on the market. But at the end of the day, the builders have to wear the brunt of the cost, or the developers or the investors, however you want to say it. The thing is it costs a lot more to build these buildings now, because builders are going bankrupt left, right and center. So now they have to charge a premium on top because they got screwed over before, basically. So they have to charge the price in 3 years' time because they don't know how inflation is going to affect them, even though inflation looks as if it's coming back down again. The thing is, at the end of the day, the cost to build that property is going to go up. Therefore, whoever these properties are getting rented out for, the renters are going to pay for the cost. So they're going to pay for the increased amount of money. We're talking multi-million-dollar constructions here. So it's not your average Joe Blow buying these properties. These are companies like BlackRock. They're already doing this in this country. It's not for your average person. The way I look at it is basically, actually, we're just giving up the ownership of our land to multinational corporations, which it seems like we're really good at doing that. We're deep into whatever it is you call this housing crisis. Not much is going to change. I feel like individually we just need to knuckle down. It's kind of why I'm trying to create something with my personal economy, because the external environment that we're all living in, the economical environment, is not actually improving. If you're in a position where you need to get somewhere financially in your lifetime, which most of us are in that position unless we're born to super rich parents, then it's not going to be off the back of the government creating all these schemes to help people. Actually, it just keeps the average person even. But actually what it does is the wealthy getting more wealthier. If you're in the middle or on the bottom, if you're on the bottom, you're just going to get screwed more. But if you're in the middle, you're going to slowly float closer to the bottom, because the wealthy are going to get wealthier, and they can't take wealth from the poor anymore. So it's the next richer they're going to go after. Unfortunately, that's where we're at. Hope you like this update. Give us some comments below. Cheers.